After 6 years of marriage to Peter, he finally realized he didn't love me. I let out a huge sigh of relief. Finally, my mission as the supporting character was almost complete. Peter handed me a bank card with 8 digits as child support. My son looked upset. I want to go find out Wendy, too. East Side feet. Relief again. Great. I don't have to raise the kid anymore either. The system also sighed with relief. Host, you can now move on to your next target. As his cold words fell, I put on my act. Tears filled my eyes. Peter, we've been together for so many years. We have a child together. How can you be so heartless? I started sobbing dramatically. The man looked down. After a moment, he reached out and wiped the tears from my eyes. Then he placed a bank card in my palm. Child support, Peter said flatly. I covered my face with one hand, crying, while grabbing the card with the other. He turned to leave. Through my tears, I watched his tall figure walking away and suddenly called out, we got married, had a child together. Now you're saying you've always loved Wendy. Where were you all this time? I shouldn't have said that. As the supporting character, once the male lead realizes his true feelings, my job was done. No need to add extra drama, but emotionally there were moments that went beyond the mission. Peter stopped walking. He turned slightly, his brown eyes calmly scanning me. I froze in place. Over the years, he looked at me like this countless times, but afterward he would pull me into his arms, his cool lips touching my cheek. He would whisper, Quinn, call me husband. So I thought there were at least some feelings. Love grows over time, right? But now I could see that with every glance he became more certain he didn't love me. He never loved me. My hand dropped helplessly. Peter said nothing more and walked away. After a brief moment of disappointment, I sighed with relief again, like waiting for a verdict that finally came. My supporting character mission was finally complete. I took my son Kevin shopping, humming a little tune, but the little boy who usually clung to me seemed listless. Even when I took him to buy his favorite toys, he looked gloomy. I realized something was wrong and knelt down. What's wrong, Kevin? He sniffled. Dad divorced you and went to find Aunt Wendy. I understood and pinched his cheek. Don't worry, no matter what, he's still your dad. Kevin looked down, tugging at my clothes. After a while, he said quietly, I want to go find Aunt Wendy, too. I froze in place. He took a deep breath, looked up at me with brown eyes identical to Peter's. Mom, Dad likes playing with Aunt Wendy, and I like playing with Aunt Wendy, too. Will you let me go? I stared at Kevin silently. The little boy didn't seem to understand what his words meant. I asked, does Wendy want you? His cheeks showed dimples. Of course, Aunt Wendy wants me. She says I'm the most amazing kid in the world. I didn't know how to react. After a long pause, I said slowly, then she'll be your mom. Are you okay with that? Kevin was stunned for a moment. Then he nodded. It's okay, Mom. After Aunt Wendy becomes my mom, Dad, and I will still come visit you. I laughed bitterly. Your dad won't come. Kevin frowned, then shook his head. Mom, if you're good like Aunt Wendy, Dad will definitely want to visit you, and I'll come with him, okay? I said okay. He seemed surprised. I agreed so easily. He blinked a few times, then carefully put the jade. Pen and I just bought him in his pocket. Great. I'll save this for Aunt Wendy. It's so pretty. She'll definitely love it. I watched his smile calmly. The system quickly spoke up to comfort me. Host, don't be sad. I said flatly, it's nothing. He's Peter's son. Father and son having similar preferences isn't surprising. Besides, when I was pregnant with Kevin, I had the system block all sensations. I ate and drank normally, without any pain or complications, so Kevin felt more like my mission target's son than my own son, since Peter and I were done. Keeping Kevin around wasn't practical anyway, since he wanted to leave. I didn't need to stop him. After sorting through these complex feelings, I sighed with relief again. No more child rearing. The system also sighed with relief. Host, you can move on to your next target. While the father and son figured out how to win Wendy's heart, I was figuring out how to catch my new target's attention. Everyone had their own problems to deal with. I sat at the bar, chatting absent-mindedly with the handsome bartender. My eyes kept glancing toward the corner. The man sat nearby, casually sipping his drink. I felt uncertain and then quietly asked, the system, he's Peter's best friend. What if I pretend to be drunk and throw myself at him and he just calls Peter over? The thought gave me another headache. If I'd known this guy was my next target, I never would have constantly opposed him before. He was always undermining my relationship with Peter. Every time Peter brought me to their gatherings, Shane would casually bring up Wendy, making Peter zone out and embarrassing me. I sighed. Internally, I downed several more drinks, then got up and stumbled toward my target. The target sat with his long legs crossed, elegant fingers swirling his wine glass. As the music suddenly exploded, the crowd started swaying, instantly blocking my view. I just pushed through the crowd and saw someone sitting across from the man, the elegant, noble Peter, and the smiling Wendy. In another blink, my target was gone. Someone tapped my shoulder. The bartender handed me a set of keys. Miss Rivers, you dropped this. I took them, embarrassedly. Thanks so much. He smiled and nodded, returning to the bar. As he left, a tall man appeared casually in front of me, one hand in his pocket, casting a shadow over my head. Shane looked down. Looking for me? What? You've been watching me for a while. I stiffened for a moment. The system quickly spoke up. Host, go after him. Go after him? I silently complained. Internally, when I pursued Peter, my character was a naive, devoted 19-year-old innocent. 7 years later, what character could I use to pursue Shane? Just as I was about to speak, Shane, what are you doing standing there? Peter's calm voice approached with steady footsteps. My face changed and I immediately hid in the nearby crowd. Peter couldn't see me now that I was pursuing Shane. The less Peter knew, the better. Just then, someone pulled me over. My forehead crashed into the man's bosom and a faint sandalwood scent instantly surrounded me. Who's this? Peter couldn't see me from his angle and frowned slightly. Just a wandering little cat, Shane said casually. Don't mess around, Peter said coldly. Shane replied carelessly, I'm home. Peter probably thought I was Shane's hookup. He always hated when I went to clubs and bars, thinking they were full of sketchy people. Once I went to a bar for a friend's birthday. When Peter found out, he gave me the cold shoulder for half a month. I had to work hard to win him back. Shane said lazily, "Aren't you going back? Aren't you afraid someone else will hit on Wendy?" Peter didn't respond. I felt his gaze on me. I pressed closer to Shane, and his fingertips played with my hair. "Wendy's cousin is here, too," Peter said flatly. I froze. I immediately understood the implication. When Peter and I were together, I often heard that Wendy's cousin liked Shane, but many girls were interested in Shane, and he never seemed to care. Now it seemed Peter and Wendy wanted to help that girl pursue Shane. That wouldn't work at all. This was my target. Shane's fingers were still loosely in my hair. I kept my face hidden against his chest and heard Peter's footsteps pause. "Wendy's cousin is a good girl," Peter said. "She's been waiting a long time." Shane made a vague sound. Not disagreement, not agreement. Just the sound of someone who has filed a piece of information in the least accessible part of their brain. Peter's footsteps eventually continued moving away toward wherever Wendy was waiting. I exhaled against Shane's shirt. "You can come out now," Shane said. I detached myself with as much dignity as a person can manage after spending 3 minutes pressed against someone's sternum. I smoothed my hair and looked up. Shane was watching me with the particular expression I had been on the receiving end of many times over the last 7 years. He watched me the way you watch something you haven't figured out yet, with a quality of attention that suggests you intend to. So he said, "Thank you," I said, "for hiding you from my best friend whose ex-wife you recently became." His voice was perfectly neutral. "You're welcome." I picked up my clutch. The system pinged quietly in the back of my mind. I ignored it. "You were watching me earlier," Shane said. I dropped my keys before you dropped your keys. I looked at him for a moment. He looked back. The music was too loud, and the light was too dim, and this was already more complicated than my approach to Peter had ever been at 19, when the mission parameters were simple, and I was too new to overthink them. "I was going to approach you," I said, honestly, because lying to Shane seemed like a remarkably ineffective long-term strategy, and something about the way he looked at me suggested he already knew when he was being lied to. And then Peter showed up, and then Peter showed up. Shane tilted his head. "You're not upset about seeing them. It wasn't a question. Should I be?" He considered that for a moment. Then he gestured toward the quieter end of the bar. "Come. Drink with me. You look like someone who's been performing all evening and needs to stop." I didn't know what to say to that, so I followed him. The first 3 weeks after Peter were logistically simple. I moved out of the house that still had Peter's smell in the hallway, and Kevin's drawings under the refrigerator magnets. I found an apartment with north-facing light and no emotional residue. I forwarded my mail. I canceled the subscriptions Peter had always forgotten to cancel, which took 2 hours because there were more of them than I had realized. I updated my contact information at various places. Peter called twice in the first week. Not about reconciliation, about Kevin's schedule and whether I was available to Watch him on a Tuesday. I told him Kevin had told me he wanted to be with Aunt Wendy. He went quiet. Then he said he would figure it out. I said, all right, and ended the call. Kevin texted once. Hi, Mom. Wendy bought me the biggest Lego set in the store. I texted back. Good. Enjoy it. He didn't respond. After that, I finished the week feeling lighter than I had in 6 years. The system was pleased. I was mildly unsettled by how clean the break felt. Not painless, exactly, but not the tearing sensation I had braced myself for. More like removing something that had been pressing against a bruise for so long you forgot it hurt until it was gone. Shane texted the day after the bar. You drink like someone running. Calculations. I stared at my phone for a moment. The system pinged. Host this is your target. Respond warmly. And I told the system I would handle it. I typed back. You watch people like someone running surveillance. His response came in about 30 seconds. Fair. Then, dinner Thursday. I'll pick you up. I told him I would send him my new address. He said he already had it, which should have been more alarming than it was, but Shane had been in and out of Peter's life for years, and by extension mine, and he had the particular quality of confidence that made unsettling things feel routine. I sent him my address anyway. Thursday, dinner was at a quiet place that was not trying to impress anyone, which already put it ahead of every restaurant Peter had ever chosen. Shane ordered without looking at the menu, which I had also done. He noticed and said nothing about it. We sat across from each other and ate and talked about things that were not Peter, not Kevin, not Wendy, not the last 7 years of my life. He asked what I had been doing before I met Peter. I told him about the work I had done before the mission parameters shifted. Everything. He listened the way people listen when they're actually interested, instead of waiting to respond. Halfway through the main course, he said, what do you want? Not what are you going to do, not what do you think about the situation. What do you want? I put down my fork. Nobody had asked me that in a very long time. The mission never asked. Peter certainly hadn't asked. Kevin had. Never needed to ask, because whatever he wanted took automatic precedence. I'm figuring that out, I said. Shane looked at me steadily. That's fine. He picked up his fork and kept eating like he had. Asked about the weather and received a completely reasonable answer. I picked mine up too. We stayed at that table for 3 hours. Peter and Wendy were, by all public accounts, happy. They posted photos. Kevin was in most of them, beaming the way children beam when they are in the presence of something new and exciting. Wendy had taken him to a theme park. Wendy had baked elaborate desserts with him. Wendy had enrolled him in a hobby class that Peter had somehow never known. Quinn had already tried to enroll Kevin in twice, only to be redirected, because the timing never worked with Peter's schedule. I didn't follow there. Social media. The system occasionally updated me on mission relevant developments, which I mostly filtered. But I noticed that Kevin's texts had stopped entirely after the second week. The system didn't consider this relevant. I filed it differently. The first sign that Peter's happy ending was slightly more complicated than advertised came through Shane Indirectly, we had been spending time together in a way that defied easy labeling. Not exactly courtship, not exactly friendship, something more like two people who have independently decided to be honest with each other and are discovering this is rarer than it should be. He mentioned in passing that Peter had called him twice that week. About what? I asked. Kevin's. Getting fevers frequently and not sleeping well. I sat with that for a moment. Wendy doesn't like disrupted schedules, Shane said, not with any particular editorial tone, just as information. I looked at my coffee cup. He asked if you were available, Shane said. He knows my number. He's embarrassed. A pause. Also, Wendy said, it was fine if Kevin went to you for the sick days because she doesn't want him passing it around. The specific phrasing landed where it was meant to land. I said, tell him Kevin can come. If Kevin wants to come. Shane relayed this. 2 days later, Kevin showed up at my apartment door with a small backpack and a fever of 38.4 degrees. He looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had just stopped tracking the daily imperceptible inches. He stood at my door and looked up at me with his father's brown eyes and said, in a voice that was trying very hard to be normal, eat. I stepped back to let him in. Have you eaten? He shook his head. I made congee. He sat at the kitchen counter and watched me cook. He didn't talk much. After the congee, he fell asleep on my couch, and I covered him with the blanket he had left here by accident months ago, which I had washed and kept folded in the cabinet without examining why. He slept for 4 hours. When he woke up, his fever had gone down to 37.8, and he looked at me with an expression I recognized, the one that meant something was happening behind his eyes that he hadn't figured out how to say yet. Mom, he said, M doesn't. Wendy's Lego set count as my birthday present even though it wasn't my birthday. I thought about that for a moment. Did she say it was a birthday present? No. Then no. He was quiet. For a moment, she got annoyed when I got sick. She said she didn't want to catch it. I adjusted the blanket. Dad said she wasn't annoyed, she was worried. I said nothing. She was annoyed. Kevin said quietly. I looked at him. His brown eyes were very serious. I didn't agree. I didn't disagree. I said, do you want more congee? He nodded, and we left it there for the moment. Thank you for listening to Channel Best Novel. Peter came to pick Kevin up that evening. He stood in the doorway of my apartment, which he had never been to before, and looked around with the particular expression of someone who expected something and found something else. The apartment was neat and clean, and there were several small paintings on the wall that I had put up because I wanted to look at them, not because they matched anything. Kevin was asleep again. Peter looked at me. I looked back. He seems better, Peter said. Fever's almost gone. A pause. He looked at the apartment again. You seem he can sleep here tonight if he needs to, I said. It's up to you. Peter nodded slowly. He stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Quinn, you don't need to say anything. He closed his mouth. Good night, Peter. He left. Shane asked me once, about 6 weeks into Whatever we were doing, whether I had ever loved Peter, I thought about it. Honestly, which took a moment. I cared. About him, I said genuinely. There were moments that went past the mission, but I was always going to leave when it was done. I just didn't expect him to be in such a hurry. I paused and I didn't expect Kevin. What about Kevin? I looked out the window. Kevin was a surprise. The system blocked most of the pregnancy sensation, so technically he was always Peter's son as much as mine. But I stopped. When he had nightmares, he came to my side of the bed. When he got hurt, he cried for me. When he learned a new word, he told me first. I was quiet for a moment. I didn't realize how much of that I had absorbed until it was gone. Shane was watching me. Is that why you're not cutting contact completely? Partly. I turned back from the window. And partly because some things you do, regardless of mission parameters. He nodded as if this confirmed something he had already suspected. What about me? He said. What about you? And my mission? Parameters? I studied his face. Shane had a face that rewarded studying. There was always more in it than the surface. You were, I said honestly. And now, I took a breath. The system has been wanting me to accelerate the approach. For weeks, I said, I keep not doing it. Why? Because this, I gestured vaguely at. The space between us, which had grown, significantly more complicated than mission parameters could neatly account for, isn't something I want to execute on a schedule. He was quiet for a moment. Then, so what do you want? Same question. Third time now. Always the same question, patient and direct, without any of the pressure that usually accompanies someone asking it. I want to figure out what I want. I said, for the first time in years. Okay, Shane said, and that was it. He poured more tea, and we watched the evening come in through the window, and it was the least complicated I had felt in so long. I had trouble naming the emotion precisely. Peter and Wendy's first visible crack came 3 months after the divorce. Kevin told me about it because Kevin had started coming over more often. Not dramatically calling to say he was moving back. Just appearing on Wednesday evenings and the occasional weekend with his backpack and his homework and his growing catalog of things Wendy had said that he was mentally reviewing for accuracy. She didn't like Kevin's noise levels. She had told him once that his energy was exhausting. She had been photographically perfect when they were doing something she wanted to document, and unreachable when she was tired. Kevin reported all of this with the careful neutrality of a small person, trying to be fair, but I had known him for 7 years, and I could hear everything. Underneath the fairness, Dad, says she, just needs to adjust. Kevin said one Wednesday, I helped him with his math homework. Is that what he thinks? I said, he looks at her when she's not looking. Kevin erased a wrong answer, like he's hoping she'll change into something. I looked at my son. He was 7 years old, and he was describing emotional longing with more accuracy than most adults manage. Are you okay? I asked. He looked at me with those brown eyes. I told her she smelled nice. Once, she said kids say the weirdest things. I put down the pencil. You know what? Kevin said carefully. When I told you your soup was good, you said, thank you. and then asked if I wanted more. Do you want more soup? He blinked, then burst out laughing, which was the sound of everything being briefly okay. I laughed too. We stayed at the table for another hour after the homework was done. Peter called me directly in the 4th month. Not about Kevin, just me. I almost didn't answer. Then I did. He was quiet for a moment. Before he spoke, I've been thinking about things. I waited. When I look at Kevin, Peter said slowly, I keep seeing all the things I didn't notice. You making his lunches exactly the way he liked. You knowing when he was getting sick before he had symptoms. You a pause. He knows every single word to 3 different songs because you sang them with him when he was small. He told me. He said Mom taught me. I said nothing. I don't know what Wendy's middle name is, Peter said. We've been together for months, and I realized I've never asked. This was apparently the thing he had called to say. Peter, I know. You don't need to. Tell me this. I know that, too. A long exhale. I keep thinking that I spent 6 years looking at you, and I didn't. See, I sat with that for a moment. Somewhere in me there was a version of this conversation that I had imagined during the harder years. The version where Peter realized and returned, and the mission was supposed to end differently. But that version belonged to a character I had been playing, not to me. You saw what you chose to see. I said, that's not a crime. It's just what it was. Quinn, we were what we were. Kevin is still yours. He'll be okay. I paused. Take care of yourself. I ended the call. The system tried to comment. I told it to be quiet. I sat in the apartment with the evening light on the wall paintings and thought about nothing particular until the feeling settled back down. Shane showed up 20 minutes later. I hadn't called him. He had a faint awareness of my schedule by now. The way attentive people develop a faint awareness of the rhythms of people they spend a lot of time with, and he knew eyed on the calendar. He had coffee. He sat across from me and didn't ask what happened. Just handed me the coffee and watched me with that particular steady attention that I had slowly stopped finding unsettling and started finding the most reliable thing in my daily environment. He called to feel bad out loud. I said, did it help? Not him. Maybe me. I wrapped both hands around the cup. I feel less like a chapter he skipped over. Shane nodded slowly. Shane. Why did you never tell Peter to notice me? All those years. You were watching him not see me. Why didn't you say anything? He looked at me for a long moment. I told him twice, he said. In the first year, I blinked. He said I didn't understand their relationship. Shane's voice was completely even. I stopped mentioning it. I stared at him, and then he said, the longer it went on, the more I thought he stopped. Started again more carefully. You seemed like you were managing, and I wasn't sure what was worse. Disrupting your life by making him see, or watching and waiting. Watching and waiting for what? He looked at me. Something in the room changed, or maybe I just stopped ignoring the thing that had been in the room for several months. Shane, Quinn, if you say something mission parameter ruining, right now I need you to know that I have a very complicated relationship With timeline management, he looked extremely composed for someone being given the most unusual warning he had probably ever received. My parameters, he said carefully, have been outside the original framework for a while now. I set down my coffee cup. Mine too, I said. The evening light shifted and neither of us said anything else for a while, which was fine because some things communicate better in silence than in words, and by now we both knew that. Kevin arrived at my door, crying for the first time on a Saturday morning in the 5th month. Not sick. Crying. Not hurt crying. He stood at the door with his backpack held against his chest like a shield and tears running straight down both cheeks. And when I opened the door, he just looked at me and said, "I want to come home." I stood in the doorway and looked at my son. He had the jade pendant in his other hand, the one he had saved for Wendy, the one he had put in his pocket at the toy store with such certainty. He held it out to me. I thought Aunt Wendy would love it. She said it was a weird gift for a child to give and put it on the kitchen counter. I took the pendant. Kevin looked up at me. "She's not bad," he said carefully. She's not you." I didn't cry. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't say anything that would shape how he processed this because he needed to process it himself, and I had learned over 7 years that the most powerful thing I could do for Kevin was mostly stay out of his way while remaining solidly in it. I stepped back and he came inside. I made him breakfast. He sat at the counter and watched me cook the same way he had when he was sick. Some things a child's body remembers before their brain catches up. After breakfast, I sat across from him. "Kevin," he looked up, "I will always love you. That doesn't change." I held his eyes. "But some choices change things. You can come here whenever you need to, but you're home with your dad, and Wendy is still your home, and those relationships are still yours to figure out." He was quiet for a moment. "Are you angry at me?" he asked. "No, you should be." I said, "You were 7. I said, "You made the choice that made sense to you at the time. That's allowed." He swallowed the jade pendant. He said, "Can I keep it here for when I come?" "Yes." He relaxed into his chair in the way that children relax when something that has been pressing on them releases. I watched it happen and felt something in my chest that the system had no category for. Peter came to get Kevin that afternoon. He stood in my hallway and Kevin ran to get his backpack and he looked at me. He cried. "This morning," Peter said. "I know. He called me first." He paused. He said he wanted to come to you. I waited. I drove him here, Peter said. I looked at him. Peter had driven his crying son to my apartment instead of absorbing the comfort Kevin was looking for. That was, in its way, the most honest thing Peter had done in 6 years. "Thank you," I said. His jaw moved. He was looking past my shoulder into the apartment. His eyes moved over the paintings, the clean counters, the pendant on the kitchen windowsill where I had placed it, the particular quality of a space that belonged entirely to whoever lived in it. "Quinn," he said. "Peter, are you..." He stopped. "Are you happy?" I considered the question, not performing consideration, actually considering. "I'm getting there," I said. He nodded. Slowly, Kevin came back with his backpack, already chattering about something he had left at Wendy's that he wanted to pick up tomorrow. Peter put his hand on Kevin's shoulder, and they walked toward the elevator, and I stood in the doorway watching. At the elevator, Peter glanced back once, not with hope, not with a request, just with the expression of a man who is finally to understand the size of what he stopped seeing. I lifted a hand. He lifted his. The elevator doors closed. 6 months after the divorce, the mission parameters for Shane had been functionally abandoned. The system had eventually accepted this with what I interpreted as resigned professionalism. Target successfully engaged, it said, with the tone of someone who has given up on controlling how a process unfolds, and is simply documenting outcomes. Shane and I were not a dramatic romance. We were two people who had decided to tell each other the truth and had discovered this was more intimate than most things usually labeled intimacy. He knew about the system. Eventually, he had more questions than most people would, and better ones, and he sat with the answers the way he sat with everything steadily, without fleeing. Does it bother you? I asked once that I came to you as a mission. He thought about it. It bothers me slightly less than it would bother most people, he said, because you stopped treating it like a mission. When the first dinner, a pause, you could have accelerated things that night. You chose not to. I had been aware of the choice at the time and had made it mostly because something about rushing Shane felt like ruining something I hadn't finished understanding yet. That was the mission. Stepping back, I said, I know. He looked at me. That's when I knew you. The moment that finally landed on Peter happened in the 7th month. It was at a birthday dinner for a mutual friend. Everyone was there. Peter and Wendy arrived together. I arrived with Shane. Wendy looked at me and smiled the smile of a woman who has won something and likes being seen to have won it. I smiled back without much behind it. Peter looked at Shane. Then he looked at me. And in that moment, the restaurant, light, the noise of the room, Kevin, somewhere at a side table talking to a cousin, Peter watched me laugh at something Shane said. A real laugh. The kind you can't manufacture because it's in the specific quality of relaxation in the body before the sound comes out. He had never seen me laugh like that. In 6 years, he had never given me something to laugh like that about. I saw him see it. I saw the exact moment the understanding arrived. Shane's hand was at my back, light and present, and I wasn't performing anything. I was just in a room being myself with someone who had made room for that. Peter turned back to Wendy, who was telling a story to the table. He looked at her the way I had once seen him look at a place on the horizon, certain it contained what he was looking for, and slowly beginning to suspect he was wrong. We didn't speak. That evening, on the way out, Shane said, quietly, he finally saw it. Yes, does that help? I thought about it. The years. Kevin's laugh. The kanji at 3 o'clock. In the morning, the jade pendant. The missions completed and the things beyond. Missions. It doesn't undo anything. I said, but yes, a little. Shane nodded. We walked to the car, and the night was clear, and Kevin had texted me from the birthday dinner asking if I had left yet, and I texted back, not yet. Did you have cake? He sent back 3 cake, emojis, and a thumbs up. I put my phone away. The tragedy wasn't losing me, I thought. The tragedy was never seeing me. While I was there, Peter would carry that, and I would carry something else. Entirely. Something that was entirely mine. Finally, actually mine. Live. Comment telling me, did they deserve? What happened to them? Or do you think their revenge should have been even? Harsher? And if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional drama and revenge stories.